I am Jennifer Brooks, 29 years old, and even though I run a fintech company worth billions, I still take the bus to work. My parents never got why I choose to live this way. Simple, no flash. Especially at our annual family dinner where I roll up in jeans and they show up dripping in designer labels. That night my sister mocked me right to my face. Still taking the bus, like it was the punchline to some joke. I shrugged it off, but then my mom's eyes locked on my wrist. She froze, staring at the watch. "That's a $8 million limited edition," she whispered, her voice trailing off. The whole room went dead silent. Forks paused mid-air, conversations cut short. I just smiled and said, "Oh, this piece of junk." That flick of my wrist shut them all up and turned the night upside down. Before I dive into how it all unfolded, I'm curious. What time is it where you're listening, and which city are you in? It makes me happy to see how far these stories travel. Hit like if you've ever dealt with family judgment, and subscribe for more raw tales like this. Growing up as the daughter of Robert and Stephanie Brooks meant elite private schools in McLean, Virginia weekends, sailing on Chesapeake Bay, and every luxury a kid could dream of. My father started his logistics firm from a single truck, scaling it into a powerhouse through relentless deals and sharp instincts. My mother hailed from a family with deep roots in real estate, her side owning prime properties around Washington, D.C. They handed me every advantage, but they also drilled in the idea of sticking to the family playbook. My sister Kayla was all in on that, coasting on connections, flashing the perks. But I craved something independent. After graduating from Georgetown's business school, I shocked them by passing on a cushy executive spot at Dad's company. Instead, I grabbed an entry-level role at a scrappy fintech startup downtown. Dad scratched his head but backed me, saying it built character. Mom flipped out, convinced I was squandering my education on some pipe dream. She sat me down one evening, her voice tight. "Jennifer, we've given you the world. Why throw it away for uncertainty?" I explained it was about forging my path, but she shook her head, worried I'd end up regretting it. Kayla was worse. She called me right after, laughing. "You could be cruising in a BMW by summer if you joined Dad," she snickered. "But sure, go slave away coding budgets for geeks who'll tank before Christmas." I brushed it off, telling her success wasn't about wheels. She rolled her eyes like I'd lost it, then texted memes about broke entrepreneurs for weeks. The startup was a whirlwind. High energy, packed with sharp minds crafting apps to democratize finance for average folks. I dove in, learning fast, starting with data entry, but quickly moving to analysis. Days blurred into nights, debugging algorithms that helped everyday people track investments without big bank fees. The team was diverse, from coders fresh out of MIT to veterans who'd seen booms and busts. I handled client demos, tweaking features based on real feedback from small investors struggling with market volatility. One pitch stood out. We landed a mid-size credit union by showing how our tool cut their fraud detection time in half. That win boosted morale. Celebrations were simple, just team lunches at a local deli. Promotions came quick. By month 18, I was overseeing the entire user experience team. Challenges popped up constantly. Competitors poaching talent, regulatory hurdles from DC that forced rewrites of compliance code. But the wins fueled me, like when our beta app helped a retiree spot a scam before losing savings. Users sent thank you notes, which I pinned on my desk as reminders. Kayla kept texting snide comments about my starving artist phase, comparing it to her cushy role in Mom's real estate office. "Enjoy your bus rides while I close deals from the office jacuzzi," she'd say. I ignored them, focusing on the grind. Mom called weekly, probing if I was ready to come home, to stability, her tone mixing concern and frustration. "Your father built this for you girls," she'd remind me. Dad was quieter, slipping in questions about my quarterly reports during holidays, his eyes showing quiet pride when I shared small victories. The startup's breakthrough came with a partnership that boosted our user base tenfold. I poured everything into it, skipping social events, eating ramen in my cramped DC apartment to save for prototypes. That environment sharpened me, taught negotiation under pressure, pivoting when features flopped in user tests. By year 2, I was negotiating vendor contracts that saved us thousands monthly. The office buzzed with innovation. Late nights debating AI ethics over cold pizza became routine. One colleague's idea for blockchain integration sparked our next big update, which I led from concept to launch. Time flew, and soon I was presenting at fintech conferences in Baltimore, drawing nods from industry pros and even a few investor inquiries. Kayla visited once, eyeing my basic setup with pity during a rare lunch. "This is your life now, cubicles and coffee runs," she asked, but I saw envy in her dependence on family handouts. She'd never closed a deal without Dad's network. Mom's letters hinted at disappointment, often including clippings of secure jobs, but Dad's occasional emails praised my independence like, "Keep pushing, kid. That's how I started." The startup hit a rough patch with funding dips after a market dip, but we bounced back by securing a grant from a DC accelerator focused on financial inclusion. My role expanded to strategy, where I mapped out expansion to mobile-first tools for underserved communities. Success felt tangible. Users emailing thanks for simplifying taxes during filing season, or how our alerts prevented overdrafts for low-income families. Kayla's jabs faded as I tuned them out, but family dinners still carried that undercurrent of judgment with subtle digs about my hobby job. The path wasn't easy. I missed family vacations to Chesapeake Bay, where Kayla would post photos of yacht parties, but the autonomy was addictive. Looking back, that choice set the stage for everything, proving I could stand alone. But it was there, amid the chaos of code and clients, that I crossed paths with someone who redefined it all. A mentor who opened my eyes to what true achievement meant. That's where I met David Lawson, a 62-year-old seasoned investor who'd backed countless fintech ventures. David stepped in as an advisor during a rocky phase when the startup was hemorrhaging cash and our core app was glitching under load. He wasn't flashy, drove a beat-up Honda Civic, rotated the same few polo shirts, and lived in a modest condo in Alexandria, despite his billions from early bets on payment platforms. While Dad had shown me the ropes of traditional business, David revealed the fintech grind, how to navigate volatile markets, secure seed funding amid skepticism, and build scalable models that actually helped people. He was sharp, generous with time, and utterly indifferent to status markers, even though he'd launched firms now valued in the tens of billions. "Genuine wealth stays under the radar, Jennifer," he said during our first coffee chat. "The second you parade it, you've lost sight of why you started." His words hit hard. I started applying them immediately, cutting unnecessary expenses and focusing on user impact over hype. When the startup got acquired by a major bank for a hefty sum 2 years in, I funneled my payout straight into my own venture, Lawson Finance Solutions, named in his honor as a nod to his guidance. He was moved by it, wiring the first investment without hesitation and taking a board seat. Those initial months were brutal. 18-hour shifts debugging code, crashing on a futon in my DC studio, reinvesting every dollar into server upgrades and talent hires. We developed an algorithm-driven platform that empowered everyday users to outsmart big institutions with personalized financial insights, like predicting credit score dips or optimizing retirement plans. Early pitches bombed. Investors laughed off our focus on underserved markets, saying small users didn't pay enough. Cash dwindled, forcing tough calls like delaying salaries. Through it, David was my anchor. calming jittery backers with data projections reminding me of my core vision when doubt crept in. He'd drop by unannounced with burgers and tales of his own flops, like the payment app that crashed during a demo for venture capitalists. "Failure's just data," he'd say, helping me refine our pitch deck overnight. On my 26th birthday, after a quarter where we finally turned a profit corner, despite bugs, he handed me a small velvet box at our office. "This one's been through my wars, 3 startups, a recession, and a lawsuit that nearly broke me," he explained. Inside was his watch, understated precise, from a limited series he'd designed back before fintech swallowed his life. I'd read about it in profiles, but underestimated its rarity. "David, this is insane. I can't take it," I protested. He waved me off with a laugh. "It might outvalue your company today, but give it time." He clasped it on my wrist himself. "Wear it when the world questions your worth. It's a reminder of yours." 3 months later, David suffered a sudden stroke and passed. The news gutted me. He'd been more than a mentor, a friend who'd believed when others scoffed. The watch became my talisman, worn daily as I steered the company forward without his steady input. In the years since Lawson Finance Solutions skyrocketed, landing enterprise clients like regional banks needing fraud tools, opening branches in New York and abroad, earning spots in tech mags and on under 30 lists. Acquisition bids rolled in weekly, but I turned them down to keep control, all while sticking to David's ethos: no extravagance. I upgraded my studio to a 1-bed, but kept the bus commute avoiding spotlights at industry galas. My family knew bits, that I'd launched something, but I dodged details at gatherings, letting Kayla ramble about her latest closing or Ryan boast his stock picks. They assumed it was still struggling. Mom sent care packages with practical gifts like gift cards for nicer clothes. Dad checked public filings occasionally, his calls growing curious about revenue spikes he spotted. Uncle James' dad's competitive brother, who'd married into finance clout, would probe casually, but I kept responses vague. The annual Brooks family dinner loomed as a ritual at my parents' sprawling estate in McLean, a colonial-style home with views of the Potomac often featured in local lifestyle spreads. Uncle James always amped the rivalry, leveraging his wife's connections for high-roller deals. His son Ryan embodied that, measuring life by portfolio gains and club memberships. As I prepped for this year's event, David's voice echoed in my head about letting judgment slide. With the watch secure on my wrist, I headed into what I thought would be another night of enduring barbs. But that simple accessory was about to ignite everything. The annual Brooks family dinner was a spectacle held at my parents' sprawling colonial estate in McLean, Virginia, with its manicured lawns and Potomac River views that screamed old money. Dad's logistics empire and Mom's real estate legacy had turned the place into a local legend featured in DC lifestyle magazines for its historic charm. Uncle James' dad's younger brother always brought a competitive edge, having married into wealth through Aunt Heather's banking family and climbing to a corner office in a top DC hedge fund. Their son Ryan lived for status his life, a parade of tailored suits and insider trading tips. As I got ready for this year's dinner, David's words about ignoring shallow judgments echoed in my mind, steadying my nerves. I chose my usual outfit, dark jeans, a plain navy sweater, minimal makeup, and his watch its subtle weight grounding me. I took the bus from my DC apartment to a nearby stop, then an Uber for the final stretch to McLean, avoiding the hassle of parking in their crowded driveway. The driver, a chatty guy named Marco, raised an eyebrow as we rolled through the estate's wrought iron gates. "Fancy spot?" he said, eyeing the perfectly trimmed hedges lining the long drive. I nodded, feeling the familiar mix of nostalgia for childhood summers here and unease at the excess. The house loomed ahead, its brick facade glowing under dusk light columns framing the entrance like a movie set. "Just drop me here," I told Marco as we hit the circular drive, already packed with a showroom of luxury cars. Kayla's sleek black SUV sat angled to catch attention next to Uncle James's Cadillac Escalade, Ryan's Porsche gleaming beside it, and a few others from extended family, all screaming wealth. My Uber, a standard Toyota Corolla, stuck out like a sore thumb as it pulled up to the grand double doors. I thanked Marco, tipped generously through the app, and stepped into the crisp Virginia evening. From a window above, I caught Kayla watching her smirk, obvious, even from a distance, likely noting my budget arrival. Before I could knock, the doors swung open, revealing Carlos, the family's longtime butler, his crisp uniform softened by a warm smile. "Miss Jennifer, good to see you," he said, his voice carrying genuine kindness. I smiled back, asking, "How's Elena and the kids, Carlos?" His face lit up. "Elena's good, and Juan just got into UVA, engineering thanks to your essay tips last summer." I grinned, thrilled for his son. "That's amazing. First in the family, right?" He nodded proudly, ushering me into the grand foyer with its polished marble floors and chandelier casting soft light. Voices and soft jazz spilled from the dining hall, the air thick with the scent of roasted herbs. I took a deep breath, bracing for the usual scrutiny. Mom spotted me first. Stephanie Brooks' early 60s stood poised in a tailored emerald dress that cost more than my rent. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. She excused herself from chatting with Aunt Heather and glided over, her smile tight. "Jennifer, darling," she said, air kissing my cheeks before stepping back to scan my outfit with a quick, critical glance. "That sweater again, I sent you a Valentino blouse for Christmas. It'd be perfect tonight." I gave her a quick hug, feeling her stiffen slightly. "This is comfy, Mom, and I'm good," I replied, keeping my tone light. She sighed, muttering, "At least it's cashmere," before leading me toward the dining hall. Dad was deep in conversation with Uncle James by a towering fireplace, but he broke away when he saw me. Robert Brooks, tall and silver-haired, carried a quiet strength. Despite his wealth, his suit understated compared to Mom's flair. His hug was warm, smelling of cedar cologne. "Good to see you, kid," he said, studying my face. "You look worn out. That startup's still running you ragged." I admitted, "It's busy, Dad, but good busy." He nodded, his eyes catching something in my expression. "Saw your firm's name in a trade report. Big contract with a credit union. Not bad." I smiled, surprised he'd noticed. "Thanks, Dad. We're getting there." Before I could say more, Uncle James approached, martini in hand, his smile more polished than genuine. "Jennifer, you made it," he said, his tone carrying a faint, patronizing edge. "How's that little business venture holding up, still afloat in this economy?" Dad frowned slightly at his brother's jab, but I kept my cool. "Doing fine, Uncle James, thanks for asking." He patted my shoulder like I was a kid selling lemonade. "Persistence pays, I suppose. Ryan's killing it at the fund. Just led a merger that's netting us millions." I nodded politely. "That's great for Ryan." Aunt Heather joined us, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Jennifer, you should visit our new beach house in Chesapeake Bay," she said, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. "It's modest, but the views are to die for." I murmured something vague, already tuning out as more relatives gathered their chatter, a familiar hum of boasts about vacations and deals. The weight of David's watch steadied me, reminding me to stay focused on what mattered. A staff member announced dinner, and we moved toward the dining hall, a cavernous room with crystal chandeliers and a table set for 20. Dad walked beside me, his voice low. "You're quieter than usual. Everything okay?" I shrugged. "Just prepping for the usual show." He chuckled, but his eyes held concern. As we took our seats, Kayla's voice cut through the clink of glasses, her smirk aimed right at me. The air shifted, and I knew the real fireworks were about to start. As we settled into the dining hall, the table gleamed with crystal stemware and polished silver, the air heavy with the scent of seared steak and rosemary. The Brooks family dinner kicked off its usual script, relatives trading boasts, like currency, each story a bid for dominance. Ryan led the charge, casually mentioning his new Rolex Daytona, its bezel catching the chandelier's light as he waved his wrist. Picked it up after closing a $10 million deal, he said, smirking at Uncle James, who nodded proudly. Aunt Heather chimed in, describing their recent Chesapeake Bay beach house renovation, emphasizing the custom Italian tile that took months to source. Mom, ever the host, complimented their taste while subtly noting her own interior designer's work on the estate's new wing. Dad stayed quiet, sipping his wine, his eyes flickering between amusement and discomfort at the display. I ate my salad in silence, dodging the spotlight, but Kayla had other plans. She leaned forward, her diamond necklace glinting, and fixed her gaze on me. "So Jennifer's still taking the bus to that little office of yours?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. A few cousins chuckled. Uncle James raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the jab. The table's attention shifted, waiting for my response. I kept my fork steady, David's watch, a grounding weight on my wrist, and said calmly, "It gets me where I need to go, Kayla." She laughed sharply. "Come on, you're almost 30. Don't you ever get tired of slumming it with the commuters? Public transit in D.C. is a nightmare." The room tittered again, Mom looking embarrassed, Aunt Heather offering a pitying smile. I took a sip of water, ready to move on, but Mom's eyes suddenly locked on my wrist, her fork pausing midair. Her face froze, a mix of shock and recognition. "Jennifer," she said, her voice low, but cutting through the chatter, "that watch, where did you get it?" Every head turned. Kayla's smirk faltered, sensing the shift. I glanced down at the watch, its simple design betraying nothing of its value, and extended my arm slightly. "This just something I wear every day," I said, keeping my tone casual. Mom leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "That's a David Lawson original, isn't it, from his limited collection?" The room went dead silent, glasses clinking to a stop. Dad looked up, confused but curious. Uncle James frowned, setting down his wine. "Lawson, the fintech billionaire who died a few years back?" he asked. Mom nodded, still staring. "He designed a small batch of watches before his first company took off. Only a handful exist. That's worth at least $8 million now, maybe more since his passing." A collective gasp rippled through the table. Kayla's mouth dropped open. Ryan's fork clattered against his plate. I shrugged, letting a small smile slip. "Oh, this piece of junk," I said, pulling my sleeve back to show it off. The room stayed frozen, all eyes on me. Dad broke the silence, his voice steady but intense. "How did you get that, Jennifer?" I took a breath, feeling David's lessons anchor me. "David Lawson gave it to me before he passed. He was my mentor, my first investor. He believed in what I was building when no one else did." Mom blinked, processing. "You knew David Lawson personally?" I nodded. "He guided me through my startup's early days, taught me what success really means. Not status, but impact." Uncle James leaned forward, his earlier condescension gone. "And what exactly are you building? You've always been cagey about this company of yours." The air tightened. I could feel Kayla's stare burning into me. It was time. "Lawson Finance Solutions," I said evenly. "We built a platform that uses algorithms to help regular people and small businesses manage finances against big players. Credit optimization, fraud detection, investment tracking. We started with underserved markets, but now we work with major banks, 2 healthcare networks, and just signed a federal contract for $900 million over 5 years. The silence was deafening. Aunt Heather coughed on her wine. Ryan stared like I'd spoken another language. Kayla's face twisted, caught between shock and something darker. Dad's eyes widened with a flicker of pride, but Mom looked stunned, her voice barely above a whisper. $900 million and your company. How much is it worth? I met her gaze directly. After our last funding round, $2.5 billion. I still own the majority. Uncle James choked on his steak, recovering with a forced laugh. $2.5 billion. And you're still riding the bus. Kayla's shock turned to a scowl. So you've been sitting on billions this whole time, acting broke to make us look bad. Her voice rose, drawing every eye. Is that why you never talk about it? Hiding so you can swoop in on Grandpa's estate when it's time to divide it? The accusation hit like a slap, sparking murmurs around the table. Grandpa's estate, a massive trust tied to Mom's real estate fortune, had been a sore point for years, with whispers of who'd get what. I kept my voice steady, though irritation flared. I don't care about the estate, Kayla. I haven't touched family money since college. My work stands on its own. She scoffed, undeterred. Right, so you can play humble while angling for the biggest share. That watch alone could buy half of DC, and you're pretending it's nothing. Mom looked torn, glancing between us, while Dad's jaw tightened, clearly displeased with Kayla's outburst. Uncle James jumped in, his tone now overly friendly. Now, Kayla, let's not jump to conclusions. Jennifer, that's an incredible achievement. Why keep it so quiet? His sudden warmth felt hollow, like he was already calculating how to leverage my success. Aunt Heather nodded vigorously. Exactly, dear. You should be proud. Imagine what you could do with a proper office, maybe a place in Georgetown. Ryan, still processing, muttered, $2.5 billion. That's bigger than Dad's fund. The shift was palpable. Their pitying glances turned to calculated interest, their earlier jabs replaced by awkward flattery. Mom reached for my hand, her voice soft but probing. But Jennifer, why live like this? That tiny apartment, the bus. You could have everything. I pulled my hand back gently, David's watch catching the light. I have what matters, Mom. David taught me success isn't about what you show off. It's about what you build and who you help. Our platforms saved thousands from financial ruin, streamlined healthcare billing, cut government waste. That's enough for me. Kayla rolled her eyes, her voice sharp. Oh, please spare us the saint act. You're sitting on billions and wearing a fortune, but we're supposed to believe you're above it all. Her words stung, but they also clarified something I'd ignored for too long. This family measured worth by what glittered, not what lasted. Dad spoke up, his tone firm. Kayla, that's enough. Jennifer's done something extraordinary. But Kayla doubled down, pointing at me. She's been lying to us, Dad, pretending to struggle while she's richer than all of us combined. And now she's got that watch. You know it'll tip the scales when Grandpa's trust gets split. The table erupted in whispers, relatives exchanging glances as the old estate feud reignited. Uncle James tried to steer the conversation, asking about my federal contract, but his eyes gleamed with opportunism. Aunt Heather suggested I meet her financial advisor, as if I needed one. Ryan asked about stock options, his tone too eager. The room felt suffocating, their newfound interest as shallow as their earlier scorn. I looked at Mom, hoping for a shred of understanding, but she just stared at the watch, murmuring, $8 million on your wrist, and you never said a word. The betrayal in her voice cut deep, but it also snapped something into focus. This wasn't about recognition. It was about control, about fitting me into their world of appearances. Kayla's accusations, the family's sudden pivot to flattery, the undercurrent of greed over Grandpa's trust, it all exposed a truth I couldn't unsee. David's watch felt heavier now, not just a reminder of his lessons, but a line between who I was and who they wanted me to be. As the dessert plates arrived untouched by the tension, I realized I was done trying to bridge that gap. The fireworks Kayla started had burned away any hope of connection, and my decision, final and unyielding, was closer than ever. As the dessert plate sat untouched, the dining hall's tension lingered like a storm that wouldn't break. The family's pivot was instant gone were the smirks and pitying glances replaced by a cloying eagerness that felt worse. Uncle James leaned across the table, his smile too wide, asking about potential partnerships with my company, as if his hedge fund could ride my coattails. "Jennifer, we should talk. Your algorithms could complement our portfolio strategies," he said, his tone dripping with opportunism. Aunt Heather jumped in, suggesting I meet her charity board connections, her eyes gleaming with the prospect of bragging rights. Ryan, who'd barely spoken to me in years, suddenly wanted details on our stock structure, asking if I'd consider opening up shares for family. Even Mom, still reeling from the watch's reveal, pressed me about moving to a proper DC penthouse, her voice soft but insistent. "You deserve better than that shoebox apartment, darling. It's not fitting for someone of your status." Kayla, though, was the worst. She pulled back from her outburst but didn't apologize, instead, offering a forced smile and a half-hearted, "I didn't realize you were doing so well, Jen." "Good for you." Her words were hollow, her eyes still sharp with resentment over the estate feud she'd dragged into the open. The room buzzed with their newfound interest, but it was all surface. None of them cared about the platform's impact or David's philosophy. They saw dollar signs, not me. I sat there, David's watch heavy on my wrist, its quiet ticking a reminder of what I valued: work that mattered, integrity over flash. Their flattery felt like a cage trying to pull me into their world of appearances and control. I'd spent years dodging their judgment, but this sudden shift to adoration was just as toxic. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the quiet room. "I'm done here," I said, my voice steady but firm. Mom's eyes widened. "Jennifer, what do you mean dinner's not over?" I looked at her, then at Kayla, Uncle James, and the rest, their faces a mix of confusion and calculation. "Not just dinner," I said. All of this. I'm not doing these gatherings anymore. I've built something real, and none of you get it. You never have." Kayla scoffed, but Dad reached out, his voice low. "Kid, don't do this. Let's talk." I shook my head, standing. "There's nothing to talk about, Dad. You measure me by what I don't show, and I'm tired of it." I walked out, their stunned silence following me through the foyer. Carlos caught my eye at the door, his nod subtle but understanding. I ordered an Uber, blocked their numbers on my phone before the car even arrived, and left the estate for good. Back in my apartment that night, I sat on my couch, David's watch in my palm, its weight grounding me. I'd learned something brutal, but clear, true success isn't about wealth or recognition. It's about living your values and making a difference, even if it means walking away from those who can't see it. David taught me that impact matters more than image, that building tools to save families from financial ruin outweighs any mansion or title. Cutting ties hurt Dad's quiet pride, Mom's misguided care, but staying would have meant betraying myself. This wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. Choosing a life aligned with purpose over their shallow metrics was the hardest but truest decision I'd made. I want you to take this lesson to heart. Your worth isn't tied to what others see: your car, your clothes, your bank account. It's in what you create, who you lift up, and how you stay true to yourself. If your family or circle judges you by surface measures, ask yourself if they're worth your energy. Sometimes the bravest choice is to walk away from toxicity, to build a life that reflects your core, not their expectations. I learned that the hard way, and it freed me to focus on what David always championed: impact that lasts. Thank you all for listening to my story. It means more than you know to share it. If you've ever had to break free from judgment to live your truth, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Hit like if this hit home, and subscribe for more stories about finding real value in a world obsessed with flash. Stay true out there.